Shockingly, we know very little in many respects. We know of lots of instances of individuals, after the fact, after something comes to light, information comes to light, that they actually have these associations or involvements in these types of groups. We know that these groups promote becoming involved in law enforcement and military in terms of employment or enlisting in the military. Now, obviously, the vast majority of people in the military and law enforcement are not involved in these kind of groups. So if we were to talk about far-right extremism, that would include, anti-government militia type groups. It would include more widely recognized white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan. If you go back, for instance, to 2006, the FBI did a report on law enforcement in particular about white supremacist infiltration. And despite the fact that the FBI essentially concluded that this is a real problem, there were no follow-up. Another part of the problem is it's individual adherence. In other words, individuals who have these beliefs. And to think that those individuals aren't influenced by those beliefs in terms of how they carry out their duties is just not consistent with what we know about how attitudes do affect people's behaviors. The history of policing in our country is steeped in racism. You look at the 20th century and law enforcement, you find a strong relationship with efforts to essentially exert racial dominance and control. And so enforcement rightfully has known for that history, especially in certain communities of color in particular, see law enforcement through that lens in part. What's the alternative? The alternative is what we've been doing, which is virtually nothing. And look where that's got us. It's got us in a world of mess. It's got us in a substantial, in terms of trust in law enforcement. It's presented substantial victimization and trauma, and frankly, terrorism in many respects in terms of communities that are affected disproportionately in terms of by police violence. This is a problem of such a scale and such a history that we're going to need a lot more of a kind of systematic approach to addressing this. So it's going to take a major national effort if we really want to address this problem. We're going to have a national effort that tries to identify the scope or the extent of the problem. And then we're going to have to start putting initiatives in place that would really try and undermine this problem. Part of it would involve training. Part of it's going to need to focus on greater efforts in terms of vetting this and identifying it on the front end before people are hired. But then making it a priority that as we evaluate officers' ongoing performance, that this is on the table.